Aloha and welcome back. Today we're going to talk a little bit about consciousness and you. And in this video, we're going to talk about, number one, what we mean by consciousness and define in more detail the levels of consciousness. We talked about that a little bit in the introductory video. We're going to go deeper today. Second, we're going to establish the relationship between consciousness, thoughts, and emotions. And that's going to provide the foundation for the weeks ahead. Number three, going to provide some insights into how plant medicine can help us to elevate our consciousness, but also some of the limitations therein. Number four, we're going to talk a little bit about the broader societal context and the evolution of our collective consciousness. And then finally, I wanted to share some additional resources for you for additional understanding in relation to the topic of consciousness. A few ways that we can define and think about consciousness. So number one would be our level of awareness and perception, how in tune we are. So sometimes we say that people are a bit disconnected, and that's just when they're not reflecting or they're not understanding the signals that either the world is giving to them or others might be giving to them. They're a bit out of tune, right? So our level of consciousness can be thought about, how in tune we are. Second, you can think about it in terms of how well we understand ourselves, how well we understand the universe and the relationships between the two. And through the levels of consciousness, there is many exciting, mystical, spiritual experiences that do become available in terms of deepening our own understanding of ourselves, and with that, the relationship with the outside world. So what is the relationship between the inside world and the outside world? Number three, each of us really experiences the world based upon our level of consciousness, right? So it's a reflection of consciousness. How we think about the world, how we engage with the world is really a reflection of our own level of consciousness. So as much as we like to all think that we see the world objectively and accurately, it's fundamentally not the case, because, perception is reality. And we all recognize that, I think more than ever these days, many people are seeing reality in many different ways. So again, it's worth remembering that as we think that other people have it wrong and that we have it right, it's just a reflection of consciousness. And we may in fact be not seeing things from a higher level as they are, or we might be seeing things from a higher level as they are not yet able to. And there's no right and wrong as such. Each of us is at a level, and that's totally okay. And each of us has the opportunity to improve that level, which is what makes this work so exciting. The last few pieces are number four. We are conscious, right? So we are consciousness itself. And once we peel away the many layers and recognize that we're not the limiting beliefs, we're not the emotions, we're not the physical body, we're something much bigger than that, much more expanded than that. Then we can not only recognize that we are consciousness, but that we can abstract away from our consciousness. So we are conscious of our own consciousness, which is a pretty incredibly unique human characteristic. So as far as we know, no other animals are aware that they're conscious of or are able to be conscious of their consciousness. And then the most exciting part, as I mentioned before, is that we're able to self-determine the evolution of our consciousness. So through some of the concepts that I'll introduce in this video, hopefully you become increasingly motivated not only to understand where you are or some of the things that trigger you down into lower levels of consciousness, but also those things that elevate you, right? Those things, those experiences, those people that bring you into higher states of consciousness, so that you can seek out more of those sorts of things in your life. And again, that's a lifelong pursuit, not something that happens just on plant medicine retreat. Now, through this process of elevation of consciousness, there's really incredible benefits that are available to the quality of the human experience. We can become much more whole in terms of mind, body, heart, and spirit, and having all of those pieces working in harmony within our self, right? And so I never could have imagined some of the benefits that are available through this harmonization of mind, body, heart, and spirit through the elevation of consciousness. And the last thing that I'd say is it's always in fluctuation, right? So it's something that is consciousness, and the elevation of consciousness is something that's best approached with a high degree of patience, humility, vulnerability, and curiosity. I have seen some people, clients in the past, as well as people closer to me, and even myself at periods of time, really throw themselves at the elevation of consciousness with a degree of kind of grim determination and kind of more old world energy, if I may describe it as such. And so I'd really encourage you, if you're dedicated to elevating your consciousness, that through that process you're being really kind and loving to yourself, because that is what's going to help you be successful and get the breakthroughs that you're looking for, is that patience, humility, curiosity, vulnerability, kind lovingness for yourself, rather than pushing yourself really hard and doing as much plant medicine as you can in a short space of time, for example. Now, in terms of what we are, I think Eckhart Tolle has an incredible quote here, and he said that ultimately we're not a person, but a focal point at where the universe becomes conscious of itself. What an amazing miracle. Now, I think Eckhart's story, if you guys don't know him, he was the author of The Power of Now. He's obviously had some incredible transcendent spiritual experiences and has become such a leader in terms of consciousness in the modern age. So if you don't know Eckhart Tolle, would really recommend that you guys check out his work. Now, in our introductory video, I shared this slide, which kind of enumerates 4 levels of consciousness. I'm actually going to skip past this slide and go to a more expanded version of that and talk more about the levels of consciousness from that slide. Now, in terms of another ways that we can think about this framework, at the bottom end, we have kind of the more contracted states, as I shared previously, the negativity of mind. And at the top, we have more positivity of mind, still within the rational states of consciousness. And then above that, we have the states of consciousness that are much more oriented around transcending the mind. And each of these levels of consciousness has an associated emotional state that goes along with it, right? So at the bottom, you've got the more contracted, depressed states of consciousness, which is things like shame, guilt, apathy, grief, and fear. And as I shared before, what we experience is inaction. So that's when we're really hanging on to those lower level emotions. We've got past trauma, we've got depression, it deteriorates our health, and we're living in a state of negativity, and we're living in a state of fear. Above that, we've got the desire or envy, anger, and pride, and that's when we're super hyperactive, right? So we've got that hustle and grind mentality. It's always, there's always more to be done. The mind is going. We're on that sort of hedonic treadmill, right, where we're eyeing up the next mortgage that we're going to overcommit ourselves to. We want more, we need more, and typically these are states of me first, right? So I'm solving for myself. Everything else, can be put on hold because I'm solving for me and mine. Above that, we reach into the more positive states of consciousness. So that's when we have a lot more clarity in terms of goals. We tend to be more high performing, more confident. We have a greater sense of belonging and connectedness. So interdependence is much more the state of being I guess collaborating within the human experience rather than something that's more self-centered. And we believe that fundamentally life is good and life is heading in the right direction. And now the biggest shift is actually between kind of the rational states of consciousness here, which are really defined by people who are performing at a high level in terms of the science and the business world, etc., and up into the transcendent or mystical states of consciousness. And this is often when you see radical changes to people's behaviors, people's hobbies, etc. And it's a real paradigm shift from the thinking mind into the more holistic self and the intuitive heart. So this is often when people's, like Carl Jung, I think he had that famous quote. He said, he who looks into his heart awakens. And what they're talking about is beginning to listen to your heart, right? And to be able to get the guidance from within your physical body rather than the spinning mind. Now, what often takes place especially when working with plant medicine, is that this mystical experience is ego dissolving, right? So we actually move beyond our small self and out into the transcendent self and the spiritual self, and that's a realm of altruism, synchronicity, universal love. There's kind of it's a higher vibration, right? And we can feel that very much when we return to our physical body, and there's kind of this deep resonance and energetic health and feeling of vibrancy of life that just is so much greater than the mind. And so obviously in working with plant medicine, this is very much the states that we want to access. And as we continue to work with plant medicine or other modalities, whether that be breath work and meditation, etc., these are the states that we want to begin to approach and indeed sustain over time. Now, these levels of consciousness, as I mentioned before, is based upon Dr. David Hawkins' work. He's got a few books that I will recommend. Number one is Letting Go, which I mentioned before. The second is The Map of Consciousness Explained, which is what's effectively being shown here. And I'll make a third recommendation later in this video. Now, in terms of these levels of consciousness, it's something that we all instinctively understand, right? We all have friends that we go and we spend a couple hours with them, and we're drained. We're emotionally drained, right? So they've brought us down to a lower vibration, unless they've taken us for a run or something like that, right? So there's people that are at a higher vibration. There's people that are at a lower vibration, and there's other friends that we go and we spend a couple hours with them. We come back home. We're super motivated. We're excited because we've had such a great time with them. Maybe they reflect a higher vibration, or maybe we're in the same vibration and we've gone and done a high vibration activity like enjoying a run together. Now, as I shared before, our experience of reality is a reflection of our level of consciousness. So when we encounter friends, family, loved ones that are operating at a lower levels of consciousness, it's an invitation, right? It's an invitation for us to maintain our own higher vibration, not to let them bring us down to their level. And it's also an invitation to see whether there are opportunities for us to unlock for them in terms of helping them see things differently and from a higher vibration, which is not to say that we should all take up responsibility for coaching and therapy of our friends and loved ones, but certainly there's an element there, and that's what we tend to do for the people that we care about. Now, as I shared before, large portions of the population today are still very much stuck in the hustle and the grind, and they believe that you got to get out there and put in tons of hard work, and that's the egoic state of mind. That's the desire. That's the pride. That's the hyperactivity. We actually recently ran a survey across 2006 Americans, and it showed that 46% believe that they are the best person they know. 46% of people who believe they are the best person they know. When I saw that statistic, I was just blown away. And it really just shows that a large portion of the population is stuck in pride, right? Where they really think that everything's about them. And it's, these are things that that plant medicine can help with. And that being said, it's often easy to heal some of that surface stuff, the things that are kind of there and easy to see and easy to fix, but it's harder after that. And so, at the moment with plant medicine, what we see is that the primary focus is on the lower levels of consciousness, right? So you look at all of the science, all of the funding, all of the narratives on media. What we see is, psychedelics may be helpful in treatment of PTSD. Psychedelics may be helpful in treatment of depression. Psychedelics may be helpful in treatment of anxiety, OCD, addictive disorders, blah, blah, blah. The list is all related to lower levels of consciousness. And I think a large part of that is that there's a real short supply of expert guidance to help people get from good levels of consciousness up to higher levels of consciousness. So these are powerful medicines, right? And to some degree, I think that in of themselves, they can help people go from lower levels of consciousness to better levels of consciousness. But the guidance that is required for our mental and emotional blind spots to really unlock those things that are keeping us from reaching higher states of consciousness, that's an entirely different sort of guidance that's required relative to again, what we see in the modern media narrative. Now, the next thing I'll say is that working with plant medicine, these are profound experiences in terms of, whether it's universal love or the interconnectivity of all things or God consciousness. These are all experiences that are available as we move up into these higher states. And they do also facilitate significant cognitive changes in our brains and how our brains are wired. Now, the challenge, of course, is, as I shared before, is to maintain that elevated state of consciousness, which is fundamentally kind of the purpose of the program that we'll be going through together. Now, as we begin to shift our consciousness and as we begin to sustain higher states of consciousness, what you will find is that the universe begins to send new challenges. So the same things that you've been struggling with for maybe the past decade or decades, right? In terms of, oh, he never listens to me, she never does this, and they don't do that. Well, these are a reflection of yourself. This was the universe telling you that there's something here that you're not paying attention to. You're not engaging with either yourself or with other people in a way that's harmonious, and so you're not getting the result that you're expecting. Now, if you have that prediction error, right, where you predicted things to go one way and they went another way, then with each of these major prediction errors, there's an opportunity for each of us to learn, right? So we have an opportunity to either contract or expand into that experience. So unfortunately, when many of us were young, we had traumatic experiences in our childhood, and as a result of that, we contracted, right? We became fearful of maybe someone or something, maybe riding a bicycle or something like that, because we had this significant prediction error, and we experienced trauma as a result. And so one of the things that I would encourage each of you to consider through this is, number one, where have you had your major prediction errors, and have you moved past that, or have you contracted away from it? And what are the lessons that the universe is currently bringing to you that you might begin to engage with in a more meaningful way in order to begin to get those shifts in consciousness, so that the universe doesn't keep sending you that same message? Because I think there's nothing more frustrating than when we feel stuck in life and it's just the universe is just beating us with the same message over and over and over again, and we begin to feel, we begin to move down, right? Because we begin more contracted, we begin to feel victimized, we can't move forward, and so that moves us down into negativity of mind and into the lower states of consciousness. Now, the other thing I wanted to share is that, particularly as I mentioned before, as you move into higher states of consciousness, it is quite common to have major changes to your life and to your lifestyle, right? So that could be friends, hobbies, career, how you spend your time and your energy. And some people wonder, am I going to move down to the Amazon and start putting feathers in my hair? I don't know, right? Some people return back to work and continue the 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. slog at Goldman Sachs. Other people make a radical shift, and there's no right and wrong here, because we want to elevate consciousness across the patch. But as and when people do connect with their higher selves and discover their true purpose and what brings them joy, all of these sorts of things, then that can lead to lifestyle shifts. So wanted to set that understanding in place so that it's not a surprise if as and when that something along those lines happens to you. Now, in saying that, if we want to, open ourselves to what the universe may be able to bring to us and really follow our bliss, then we must let go of our old identity. And that is something which is, that's not an overnight process, obviously. If I take my own example, for years, I was so deeply identified with the management consulting work that I was doing that my emotional state was very much tied to how work was going. So did I land the deal? Is the project going well? These things were one for one with my emotional state. And I was carrying that with me regardless of whether or not I was at work, because my identity was so much tied to my career. And so there is a sort of decoupling between old identity and self that often takes place over the course of this self-discovery and transformation. Final piece I wanted to share about plant medicine and how to get the benefits, and this is, I think, a strong scientific foundation for this course. In essence, is what the science tells us, and this is research that has been done from 2,267 ayahuasca ceremonies, interviewing people after their ceremonies. So it's a pretty comprehensive data set. What the science shows us is that, number one, plant medicine can really increase our joy for life, which is amazing, incredible. Number two, it can deepen our spirituality. curiosity. And for me personally, I was an atheist before I started working with plant medicine. So it's been a hell of a journey. Excuse my French. And then third, it can not help us remove our toxic feelings. So this is our own self-determination in our evolution. This is so fundamentally important, and so many people are overlooking this important point. So the removing the toxic feelings is the thoughts and the emotional work, and that's really what we're going to be focused on in weeks 2 and 3, to help you see negative patterns of mind and to help you release the lower level emotions: shame, guilt, fear, pride, envy, apathy, grief, all of those sorts of lower level emotions that we spoke about a second ago here. Those are the emotions that we want to be releasing out of the physical body to reach the higher states of consciousness. As I shared before, so I see this work now as it's 80% mental and emotional work, and once we understand that where the mental and emotional blocks are, then we can bring those blind spots into ceremony, and then we're able to release those blind spots, and that's when the transformation happens, and that's when the sustained transformation happens. Unfortunately, I see in this ecosystem that there's plenty of people who've been doing plant medicine for 20 years, and they're full of negativity, scarcity, judgment, and spiritual bypass is super common, right? So there's, particularly in this industry, there's a lot of finger pointing about what people should and shouldn't be doing. And it's like, wow, for all these people who've had these transcendent mystical experiences of universal love and interconnectivity and all of those sorts of good things, to see how that still manifests in the 3D world in terms of negativity of mind is understandable to me, because I was walking that path myself, where I was going on a retreat and then everything would return to normal. And the difference is the mental and emotional work. So again, I'll say that again, we really need that guidance, and that's what our coaching and therapy is for, and of course this program, to rewire those decades-old entrenched patterns, right? Because it's hard work. If we knew what those mental and emotional blind spots were, then we wouldn't necessarily need plant medicine. We'd already be working on them. We wouldn't need coaching. We'd already be working on them. But we need to discover what they are. We need to surface them, bring them up to the front. There's often some emotions that are tied with those, often powerful negative emotions, limiting self-beliefs, and then be able to release those. And that's how we can really anchor the benefits back into reality. One of my favorite quotes here is, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family. And this is a quote by Ram Dass, and I think it's so profound, so enlightened. And again, I would, as and when we spend time with people who can trigger us, it's that window, right? It's that window into mental and emotional work that we can do to be able to release some of those lower level things, so that we can transcend that thing that's keeping us tied to a lower level of consciousness. Now, I also wanted to touch briefly on what I see in terms of our collective shift in evolution, right? So we've been in, I think, this era that we're at the end of has been really defined by egocentricity, right? Where we over-identify with our minds, and we believe that life is happening to or for us. Now, most people in this paradigm that we're in still now are focused on fulfilling societal expectations and the never-ending kind of hedonic treadmill, right? The material ambitions and desires. And that's because fundamentally we don't know what our soul wants. We've been disconnected from our higher selves. And so, in the absence of knowing what we individually really want, then we allow ourselves to take up the societal expectations. Now, what that leads to is that people prioritize the accumulation of money, of power, of status, and that comes at the expense of others, because it's, the old school hierarchy, and it's coming definitely at the expense of our planet. Now, what we're all experiencing as a result of that dynamic is inner turmoil, right? Because on some level, we know that this isn't our true purpose. And as a result of that, there's compulsive thinking. You're comparing yourself to what do the neighbors have? Did I get promoted? You're always wanting the next thing, and you feel anxious because you're constantly living in this space where you don't have enough and you need more in order to think that you'll be fulfilled if you get that next raise or promotion or whatever it is that you're chasing after. But you can't fundamentally win that game. It looks like, maybe Elon will be the first to have his apartment on Mars, but I'm sure he won't be happy at that point. He'll find the next thing to chase after, right? So the emotions that we feel on the daily basis is those lower level egoic emotions, right? The pride, the envy, the fear, the scarcity. It's not enough. And so we never feel like we're living to the fullest. And as a result of that, we're kind of sick, right? In terms of there's sickness of the mind, it then manifests in the body. There's a lack of fulfillment and a disconnection from the whole because we're focused so much on ourselves, but not from a loving and beautiful place, from more of I'm not good enough. I need to propel myself forward so that I can feel good enough. And that is, of course, what's leading to a lot of the planetary destruction as well. Now, I think where we're going is towards something that's much more exciting, much more holistic, where we get the guidance from mind, body, heart, and spirit, right? So the mind has been returned to its rightful place in the hierarchy of self, where it's in service to the whole. You know, as the quote goes, the mind is a wonderful servant, but a terrible master. Many of us have been mastered by our minds through the course of our careers and the demands of everyday life. And so returning the mind to a more peaceful place within the whole is certainly a big benefit that can come from this work. As a result of that, we're able to really fulfill our inner potential and our true purpose and be of greater service to ourselves and to others as a result of that. We can transcend the ego and really begin to listen to the guidance and intuition from within, and also understand and add to the whole in terms of our contributions to mankind. And through that, we can have more inner contentment. We can feel when things aren't right, we've got that deeper sense of enjoyment in everyday life, and there's just love, peace, joy, and abundance, more of that everyday life. And again, it's not to say that these are higher states that we permanently reach, but certainly that's more of what we can have in our everyday experience. And through that, we can live to the fullest and really be healthy, connected to ourselves, connected with each other, the collective, and move towards greater harmony on the planet. So I think that's a little bit of the, shall we say, paradigm shift that's currently taking place and being accelerated by a particular virus that shall not be named. The other aspect that I just wanted to emphasize is love being a universal truth that transcends differences, debates, and rationality. I will admit that I was someone for many years who liked debates and was firmly anchored in the rational world. But once we understand that love actually sits above all things rational and are able to begin to integrate that into our experience, it has such a profound implication for how we live, how we think of others, how we treat others, how we treat ourselves, and how we can thrive as a species. So with that, I wanted to thank you again for tuning in and summarize what we've covered. So number one, each of us can elevate our consciousness. It requires mental and emotional work to sustain the benefits and to really get those quality of life improvements that we're looking for. Your evolution of consciousness has no upper bound, right? So one of our spiritual mentors within Behold, he says that he believes enlightenment should be a starting point, because that's when you've kind of gotten rid of the negativity. And at that point, that's when the real work begins to continue elevating our consciousness. So a bit of a far out concept, but I really like that anchoring, that reframing of our understanding. Today we live in a paradigm where we've set the bar for mental health at such a low level, and we've said that anyone below this bar, they need to go see a therapist or a doctor, or get on some SSRIs in order to be better, and that will bring them back up over this base level, and then they're fine. They can get back to work and living life. But fundamentally, that's not it. There's many layers of consciousness, and they continue upwards infinitely, and each of us can continue to elevate our consciousness. So that's a very exciting and again a lifelong pursuit. Again, I'll emphasize that through this work, we don't realize any idealized fixed state, right? There's no attainment as such. It's just that we improve our level of understanding of ourselves, and we can continue to do so. And I spoke just now about the collective shift, but I think what's most important in relation to that is not that we try to get out there and tell 20 other people that they need to go and do plant medicine, but that we focus on ourselves, right? And that we, by working on ourselves and continuously improving ourselves, we begin to serve as an inspiration for others to continue to improve themselves. And that's the exponential effect that I think is possible and will take place over the very short duration, I think, in the years ahead. So as more and more people understand the power of plant medicine to elevate our consciousness, I think we're in for a very collective and exciting shift. So I wanted to also, in closing, provide you a bit of an invitation and a few recommendations. I think understanding consciousness is something that's, sure, we can understand concepts and begin to think about those and apply those into our daily lives. We can do exercises within this course. But again, really, I'd like to invite each of you to consider yourself a student of consciousness. And again, that's something that's very experiential, right? So through working with plant medicine, through other modalities, meditation, setting some time aside for breath work, even exercise, we can access this incredible variety of states of consciousness. And so would invite and encourage each of you to spend time throughout this course, absolutely, but even beyond that, to become a student of consciousness, because it's just the most exciting and rewarding thing. So I'm going to make a few recommendations here, and you might enjoy. Don't feel like you have to watch them now. You can always come back to this and watch them at another time. In terms of reading, I've mentioned the book Letting Go by Dr. David Hawkins. There's another great book by him called Power versus Force, which again does an incredible job at helping us to see power, which is something that's beautiful and inherent within each and every single one of us, versus force, which is, the version of power that is not so beautiful and comes at the expense of others. And so that's a really great book. The other one is The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Dr. Joseph Murphy. Highly recommend that one. I think you can find it on YouTube and listen to it if I'm not mistaken. And then in terms of a few recommendations on YouTube, Tom Bilyeu has I think it's about 2, maybe even 3 hour interview with a gentleman who's gone far in terms of his meditation practice and is prioritizing a lot of his meditation practice and some of the experiences that he has in relation to his understanding of the matrix and what reality is and isn't. And I think a lot of his descriptions are very good in terms of my, relating to my own experiences. Again, these are subjective experiences. We all have our own experiences, but this one really resonated with me in terms of what he has come to recognize about reality. Another that's pretty interesting is the stoned ape theory. This one's about 15 minutes long or so. It's describing how it's not that plant medicine does interesting things to our brains. It's that our brains are as interesting as they are in no small part as a result of plant medicine. So that fundamentally we have co-evolved with these plant medicines. The Immortality Key, which is also done by After School, which is these cool animations that you may have seen before, is a really great description about how psychedelics were very likely used in the ancient world through Greece and the surrounding cultures therein. So highly recommend that one. It's also a book. If the video grabs you, then I highly recommend that you read the book as well. So hope you have a great week and hope you enjoy this upcoming film, Finding Joe. I think it will help you find some additional inspiration. And once again, hope you have a lovely day. Aloha.